avoid bidding when you're on the aircraft Wi-Fi. Another thing to point out on the message board, besides the targeted line average, is the hyperlink to the PBS guide, which I zoomed in a little bit here. Straight from that message board, you can click onto the PBS guide, and it will show you a bunch of different additional resources. I'm going to switch screens right now just to show you what the PBS guide looks like very quickly when you are in your dashboard. So here's the live dashboard for February, and where you saw the targeted line average. Down here is the hyperlink. You can click on that, and it'll open up this PBS guide, which has tons of different information. If you have any further questions after this presentation, this is one of the great places to get some reliable information. Here in, hang on, getting the spinning circle. Okay, so after your dashboard, anything you would like to add? No, okay. After this slide is here to explain just some of the language that we use when bidding in PBS. You'll see that the word pairings is used a lot in the PBS software, but out on the line, we also call a pairing a trip or a sequence. So a lot of the definitions for that will be used interchangeably. A pairing is a trip, is a sequence. PBS, as you might know from bidding reserve, has 7 layers. And then we use these same 7 layers when line bidding. And properties and preferences selected in the 7 layers will create your 7 pairing pools, which is where the trips come from to build your schedule. A pairing pool is a group of pairings that satisfies the properties, preferences, and specific days off that you have selected in that layer. PBS will try to honor pairings from your earliest layers first, going on to the next layer only if it is unable to complete a schedule in the earlier layer. So in this screenshot here, you can see that this flight attendant bid 246 pairings in the first layer. And if PBS cannot award them a full legal line in the first layer with the 246 pairings they have selected, it will move down to layer 2 to get to the and access this 412 pairings to see if it can create a legal line by adding some of those. If it can't, then it'll move down to layer 3, layer 4, layer 5, layer 6, layer 7, etc. It's important to note which I think I do here on the next slide, is that the number of pairings in your pairing pool consist of each position of each pairing on each day. So if you bid one pairing, one sequence of a 737 trip in layer 1, the number of pairings for that layer will be 4 because it will show all of the position numbers for that sequence. This particular picture here is showing what your layer tab will look like when you have not put in any properties or preferences yet. This bid package, every single trip that is in the base has 23,662 pairings. Before you bid anything, the number that is bid or that is in layer 1 is only 21,865. The reason that those numbers differ is because the default pairing pool, which is what you would bid if you do not add in any properties or preferences, does not include red eyes, ODANs, or satellite pairings. If you want to bid these pairing types, you must knowingly select or add them to your bid. As you add preferences or properties and preferences, the system filters out only what you have selected and then moves the rest down to the next layer. So if for instance, you bid prefer pairing type 2, that's what would be in layer 1, and then everything that does not meet that property will move down to layer 2. On this next slide, I show an example of what a good bid would look like when you're submitting your bids. There's a couple reasons why this is a good bid. One of them is that there are trips or pairings showing up in each layer. Another reason this is a good bid is because this person bid 9,869 total pairings out of 10,201 pairings in their basis bid package. If this is a very junior flight attendant, this is a good number of total pairings to bid because they bid to their seniority. If a good rule of thumb is if maybe you're 90% seniority is what it says on your dashboard, you're going to be wanting to bid 90% of the bid package approximately. But you also just want to make sure that you're bidding to your seniority, meaning trips that are realistic for your bidding seniority. So this is just a good bid because it adds additional pairings to each layer until you get to your layer 7. And you possibly have heard of the term the Christmas tree, which is what people are trying to get when they bid. And that is just showing that your pairing pools expand by each layer when you get to layer 7 in the shape of a Christmas tree.
You're muted.
Rachel, you muted yourself.
I don't know how long I've been muted. I'm sorry. Has it been muted the whole time?
No, I don't think so. I don't know when it started.
Okay.
Everyone can hear again. Yeah.
I'm sorry
It was
that it was
after
muted. I don't know
after-
exactly what part I have to go back to, but I
Right at
will
Christmas.
go back.
It was right at Christmas.
The last thing
tree.
we heard was Christmas tree.
To this slide, I guess.
They said the Christmas tree. They got that part.
Okay, so we got the good bid. That's the Christmas tree. Great.
Thanks.
Thank you for whoever said that. So this is unfortunately a bad bid. And the reasons, initially this will look like a good bid because the total pairings is 9,479 out of the 10,201 in the bid package. So you're bidding a good amount of total pairings by the time you get to layer 7. But the reasons why this is a bad bid is because there is a 0 in both layers 2 and layer 6. You do not want any layers showing 0. A 0 in the layer means that you may not have, or you have not added any new pairings to that layer and essentially wasted that layer. So you may have changed your properties or preferences a little bit in layer 2, but whatever changes you made did not populate any additional pairings into that layer. So if you cannot hold a full line from these 323 pairings, which keep in mind is every position on every sequence that operates on the days that you selected. If PBS cannot give you a full line from those 323, it will move down to the pairings that you had put in layer 2, but there were no pairings in layer 2. So automatically goes down to layer 3. Another reason why this is maybe not a good bid, or is not maybe, the reason why it's not a good bid is because in layer 7, you have 5,631 of the 9,479 pairings that you bid. It's important to note that every pairing that is in the same layer is weighted the same. So 5,631 of your pairings were weighted equally in layer 7. And while it got you to a good percentage of the total bid package being bid, chances are you like some of these 5,631 pairings more than the others. And you could have utilized layers 2 and layer 6 to distribute this 5,061 a little bit more evenly and prioritize some of those trips over the others. So you just want to make sure that you utilize all 7 layers. On this slide, I talk about pairing types, which you may be familiar with already from having worked some of your trips. But I just wanted to point out some of the things about these different pairing types. For a red eye is a domestic pairing with a duty day that, or duty period that is scheduled to touch 1 a.m. to 1:01 a.m. home base time. An IPD pairing type is not considered a red eye because it's not domestic. It's an international premium destination. Any operating or deadhead flight to or from Europe, Asia, Deep South with a premium service. So here in Chicago, we have, we don't have Asia or Deep South, but we do have, these are like our London, Madrid, Rome, those type of international premium service trips. NIPD, I think is important to point out because NIPD stands for Non-International Premium Destination, but the acronym is a little bit confusing because it is an international trip. Even though it says Non-International Premium Destination, it is a international destination with a non-premium service. So think of your Caribbean trips or Hawaii, I think, Central America. Yes, those are international trips, but they do not have the premium service. Regular is what most of us regularly fly. It's any domestic pairing in the 48 states, Canada, and Alaska. And then we also have shuttle pairings, which contain certain shorter flight segments like Boston to DC, Boston to LaGuardia, DC to LaGuardia, Chicago, LaGuardia. We used to have a different service on the shuttle pairings, but now it's really the, that's not really a designator that we use so much anymore in PBS. So you'll see that on the drop down when you're looking at pairing types for your trips. But it's not one of the main ones that we would suggest sorting by. And then lastly, ODANs, which is the on-duty all-nighter that has a single duty period with on-duty hours that touch 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. home base time. Just a reminder that red eyes and ODANs are not in your pairing pool without you intentionally selecting them. And then also you can see the warning here on this slide where selecting pairing type will include pairings with at least one leg with that pairing type. So if you select pairing type NIPD, it may not necessarily be an NIPD layover. It could just be one NIPD leg. So you might be working Chicago to Cancun, but instead of getting the Cancun layover that you had hoped to get by including that, you are going Chicago, Cancun, Dallas that first day and getting a Dallas layover. So it's just important to point out that it's one leg of the trip will trigger it to populate when you're selecting that pairing type. Moving forward, specific versus generic. So there are two different methods to bid your line in PBS. specific bidding, which is when you bid an exact pairing identified by a pairing number. And generic, which is when you are using generic properties such as layover city, report between, prefer pairing length to populate the trips that will be in your pairing pool. So to explain that a little bit more, specific, like I said, is the exact pairing identified by a pairing number. So it could be that trip that I was just talking about, Chicago, Cancun, Dallas, layover, fly back to Chicago the next day. That's a very specific pairing number that, or pairing that is identified by, let's say, pairing 2342. And you select that exact pairing number to be bid. Generic, you could bid properties such as layover at Dallas, prefer pairing length 2 days, and it might populate that same trip, but you're doing it in a generic way where it could also populate a lot of other trips. So I wanted to point out that you might hear out on the line that some flight attendants say that they bid very specific. But what they might mean is that they bid generically with a lot of these different parameters, a lot of different properties. An example of bidding generically is if you prefer 2-day trips with LA layovers, that the layovers are over 16 hours, and you have a maximum of 2 landings a day. This is bidding generic because you're using generic properties to bid for a selection of trips, and it could result in more than one sequence number being bid. But a flight attendant that bids all of those properties might say they're bidding specifically. They're bidding generically, but in a specific way. If that makes sense. So if you bid that specific sequence, 2, 3, 1, 4, whatever, you're bidding specific. It is very important, probably one of the most important rules of PBS, that you do not bid specific pairings and generic properties in the same layer. This will confuse the system. So if you are going to pick those specific pairing numbers, that needs to be in one layer, and then in a different layer, you can use the generic properties. You do not want to bid that specific pairing 2314 in layer 1, and then also bid layover at City Dallas in layer 1. Those are one specific sequence and one generic property, and they need to be bid in separate layers. So first, I talked about how there's 2 different methods of bidding, specifically or generic, and I will first show you how to bid specific pairings. So how do you find the specific pairings to bid? I'll show you this on my live PBS screen as well, but to start off, you will click on the pairing tab, click search pairings, and then add more search criteria. So you can see here that when you first click pairing, search pairings, it's going to show you the entire bid package or all of the trips that are in your base. In this example, when they clicked search pairings, it shows 604 pages of trips to choose from or to search through. 604 pages is a lot of trips to search through to select which pairings that you like from them. So instead of clicking through all 604 pages, you can click add more search criteria and sort of narrow down your search to be only including the trips that you really want to specifically bid. So let me go to my PBS bid here and show you what I'm talking about. Under pairing, search pairings. For February, there's 616 pages of pairings or trips in the Chicago bid sheet. I would like to be a little bit more narrowed down in my requests for what I want to bid specifically. So I'm going to select to search the bid packet for prefer pairing length 2. which is now when I add it to the search criteria, it is only going to show me pairings that are 2 days in length, or we might say 2-day trips. You'll notice that the 606 pages of the bid sheet is now only 149 pages. 149 pages might seem fine for you to search through, but maybe you want to narrow it down a little bit more. So you can add some more search criteria. You'll see here at the top of the page that there are some search criteria here that are highlighted. There's also many other properties that are hiding here behind this plus sign. When you open your page, it's likely you will not have this same list here, because what this is showing is my favorite search criteria that I like to use when I'm creating my own bid. If you would like to add your most frequently used search criteria, you can favorite them by clicking this tag next to the property, and it will be added to your favorites, so you don't have to go searching through this long list every single time. But to get back to searching and getting this number less than 149 pages, you have to think about what's most important to you. For me, it's how many legs I fly a day. So that would be under maximum landing per duty. In my dream bids, I would like to have no more than 2 legs a day. So I'll add that to my search criteria. It did lower the number a little bit. Maybe you want to be more specific in what you add, but I think I feel comfortable searching through this many pages. So I will begin to do that. Let's say this first trip here, this first pairing, is something that's desirable to me, and I'd like to specifically bid this in my layer 1. This mini calendar here shows you the origination dates that this sequence or pairing initiates on. So it occurs in the bid month originating on February 14th and February 21st. Maybe I really would like to be in Dallas for a 25-hour layover on February 14th, but I don't really care about being there on the 21st. So I would like to just select the 14th and specifically bid that pairing number on the 14th in my layer 1, and then I'll click add bid. Now over here on your layer overview calendar, you'll see that that specific pairing number 5107 was added to your bid in layer 1 specifically. If you accidentally bid that, you can just click on it and delete it right here. Are you sure you want to delete that bid? Yes. If you really like this trip and you want to bid it on both the 14th and the 21st, you could individually select the 14th and add it to your bid, and the 21st and add it to your bid. It's a little bit more time consuming, especially when you get to some sequences that operate maybe on every day of the month. That'd be a lot of clicking. But if you, another way to bid this sequence or pairing that operate on every day that it operates is by clicking this right here and adding that to your layer. And now you'll see that it populated that sequence on every day that it originates. Something else to point out here is you'll see that some of these numbers are in orange. I have some pre-planned absences on my schedule for February, so I have these days blocked off in orange. So even if let me just delete these ones so it doesn't get too confusing for you later. But even if I select this and try to bid every single time that this sequence here originates in the February bid month, and I add that to my layer 1, only the time that this sequence originates on the 1st is going to show up on my layer overview calendar. because I have a pre-planned absence on the 6th. So it will not populate a sequence over my pre-planned absence. Pre-planned absences could be vacation, jury duty, CQ, any of those types of things. You can also see where this green, specifically bid trip, shows up here. Okay. So, let me look at what's next. I'll go back to my presentation here. And here's my, maybe, there we go.
Just give it a second, it catches up, it's kind of, it lags.
Okay, so then this is where,
Got it now.
yes, so this is basically what I was just showing you, where we did 2 days. It narrows down the bid sheet. You can bid them in these 2 different ways. One specific origination date, or select the pairing ID number to select all the originations in that bid month. And now, when you move on from your specific bidding, here's the other method of bidding, which is what we call generic bidding. So properties and preferences for generic bidding. A property is a characteristic such as preferred pairing length, and the preference is the bidding option. So the property would be preferred pairing length. The preference would be 1, 2, 3, or 4 days. Oops. Same thing with the property could be layover at city, and the preference would be San Diego, or whichever one that you decide to select. I'm actually going to show you again on the PBS system something that I think is helpful is when you get to the pairing tab. Originally, how we bid specific was searching pairings and then putting in some criteria and selecting the individual pairings from those parameters. But if you'd like to bid generically, you also go to the pairing tab, but instead of clicking search pairings, you click add more properties. This is again going to show my list of favorite properties. Yours might look different, or it might just have the entire list of properties here. And you can add them to your layers to sort of start to restrict down your pairing pools. It's important to note that PBS is very literal. So when it says prefer, PBS means only. I don't know if I should go back into like the thing every time, but sorry, bear with me here, but on generic, okay, prefer means that you only want pairings that include that specific preference. So for example, if you prefer pairing length as your property and your preference is 3 and you put it in layer 1, you're telling the system that you only want trips that are 3 days long. So another example would be prefer deadheads. If you select this and you put it into layer 1, you would be telling the system that you only want trips with a deadhead in them. Sometimes we might think that if you put prefer deadheads, that you're asking the system to give you trips that have a deadhead in them. And then if you can't hold that it'll give you other trips. But what you're really telling the system in that layer is you only want trips with a deadhead in them. So that is important to know what prefer means. On the opposite end, we have the avoid property. The avoid property is telling the system that you would like any trip as long as it does not have that preference. So for avoid laying over at city, you would be, and you put El Paso, you'll be telling the system that you would like any trip as long as it does not lay over at El Paso. We just want to make sure that you are aware that's what you're doing when you're clicking avoid layover city, is it will populate every single trip that does not have a layover at El Paso into that layer. So tons of trips could be added to your pairing pools, and those trips may conflict with the other properties that you have selected in that layer. So it could be recommended to use your preferred properties to narrow down your pairing pools and become more restrictive using your preferred properties rather than using the avoid properties. But I just wanted to point out that the avoid properties are there. Do you have anything to add about avoid? Okay. Here on this slide, we have the and or bidding logic. And what and or bidding logic is, it's the way that PBS thinks. So for example, when you're using the same property, in this case, prefer pairing length, and you're using it with more than one preference in the same layer, it is going to use the or logic. This means if you put prefer pairing length 3 in layer 1, and you put prefer pairing length 4 in layer 1, both the same property with different preference, it will give you any pairing that is 3 days in length or any pairing that is 4 days in length. And they will all be weighted the same. When you add in a property that is a new or different property, such as layover at city, San Diego, it will use and logic. Meaning, in this example, you're bidding 3-day trips that have a San Diego layover, or 4-day trips that have a San Diego layover, and all of those trips will be weighted the same. So if you added in another layover at city, maybe Los Angeles, into your layer 1, it would be prefer pairing length 3 days and a layover at San Diego, or prefer pairing length 3 days with a layover at LA, or a 4-day trip with a layover in San Diego, or a 4-day trip with a layover in LA. And all of those would be weighted the same because they're in the same layover or layer, sorry, layer. So that is the way to combine properties with different preferences within the same layer, how the system rates it. An important tab on your PBS bid is the layer tab. And we can go back to the PBS bid and bid some properties to show how they will show up on the layer tab. So if you're bidding generic, you'll click add more properties. And let's say you want to prefer pairing length 2 in your layer 1. You'll add this. And now you've added that generic property. You can go to your layer tab. Hang on, let me just delete this really quick. Okay. You can go to your layer tab and see that 2-day trips have been selected in your layer 1, and everything that's not a 2-day trip has moved down to your layer 2. Now you'll notice that my total pairings here is nowhere close to the number of total pairings in the bid package. This is because of my planned absences. Any pairing that touches one of these planned absence dates will be automatically removed from the total pairing pool. Your total pairing pool, if you do not have any planned absences, will be much closer to this number, but it will not be this number because the total pairings does not include red eyes, ODANs, or satellite pairings unless you add them in. But to go back to this, you selected out you told the system you'd like to bid any 2-day trip in your first layer. And then all of the other types of trips, 1 day, 3, 4-day trips, are in your layer 2. You can add more properties in. Maybe in your layer 1, you like 2-day trips, but you really would like to have your 2-day trip sign in at a certain time. So you would say report between maybe 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. if that's what you would like, to not be very early or very late. You'll add that in to your layer 1. So now, using the and or logic, you can see that these are 2 separate properties, which means prefer pairing length 2, and those 2-day trips that you're selecting need to report between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. in layer 1.
Can you elaborate on something real quick?
Yes.
Can you go discuss again what prefer pairing type means? It's show them the drop down.
Yes.
Prefer pairing.
So prefer pairing type. Oh, prefer pairing type. Yes.
Thank you.
Of course. So add more properties. One of the properties that is one that you can choose from is called prefer pairing type. When you select preferred pairing type, you can see the property. You can see the preferences are red eye, ODAN, IPD, shuttle, NIPD, or regular. Those are the types of trips that we were talking about earlier. All of the IPD, shuttle, NIPD, and regular will automatically be included into your default pairing pool before you start bidding. But if you wanted to add in red eyes or ODANs, this is how you would do it. So under prefer pairing type, you could select red eye and put red eyes into your layer 2. Red eyes, even if it's a 2-day with a red eye, are not going to be in your layer 1 because you have to intentionally add them in. So you intentionally added them into your layer 2. A reminder that a red eye is a domestic sequence that has that operates over 1 a.m. to 1:01 a.m. home base time, is scheduled to touch that time. Other pairing types is like IPD, you could bid that. It's also, if you're bidding specific, maybe you want to search your pairings, add more search criteria, prefer pairing type, red eye. And you can see it'll filter out the 30 pages of sequences that have a red eye flight as one of the legs. Which is another good time to note that prefer pairing type, if you put in NIPD, you'll see that it populates some trips that, yes, have a Kingston layover, that's an NIPD layover, but it also has a Miami layover on this one or a Dallas layover on this one. So it's just saying that one of the legs within the sequence is that preferred pairing type. To go back to generic bidding, add more properties. If you want a more detailed definition of what these properties are, the PBS guide that is located through the hyperlink on your dashboard. I'll show you some other ways to get to this PBS guide later, but right here under the hyperlink will have a lot of the definitions of what the different properties mean. So to continue with this example bid here, you, let's say you really want 2-day trips with that report between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. But if you can't hold 2-day trips that report between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m., you'd be okay with holding 2-day trips that report at any time, as long as they're 2 days. You don't care if it's before 9 a.m. or after 2 p.m. You'd just be willing as long as it's a 2-day trip. So we can look at the layer tab and see what that did. This is what it looked like before when you had 2-day trips in layer 1 reporting at 9 a.m. or reporting between the window of 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. In layer 2, you're willing to work 2-day trips, but you do not care what time they report. So you can see in your Christmas tree here that you bid 366 pairings with these parameters both, and then 1,288 pairings in layer 2 that are 2 days that report outside of these constraints you used in layer 1. And then all of the other trip types, turns, 3 days, 4 days, have been moved down to layer 3. This is a very basic example of generic bidding where I only used 2 different properties. Obviously, I've not bid these layers yet, but you can add some more properties to your initial layers if you want. And the goal is to have this Christmas tree expand by your properties and preferences, populating additional pairings in each layer until you get to your total amount of pairings that matches your seniority.
A question from the chat.
Sure.
If you want to avoid red eyes, then you do not need to add any properties because you can only get them if you add a prefer pairing type for red eyes. Is that correct?
Yes. So I don't know if you guys could hear Jason on the question or if you can see it in your chat, but someone was just wanting to confirm that if you want to avoid red eyes, you don't have to add any preferences in or properties in, and that's correct because red eyes, ODANs, and satellite pairings, they will never show up in your pairing pools unless you intentionally add them into your pairing pools. Right. They won't show up in your pairing pools if it's forced on your line though, but you could potentially in a bad case scenario be awarded a red eye, even if you never bid red eyes in your total pairings in any of your layers. This is something that we'll talk about a little bit later, where there are some instances, depending on your seniority, that will award you pairings that are outside of your layers. But we'll talk more about that later. They'll never be included in your pairing pools or in your layers unless you intentionally add them. Okay, so let's see where we are. PowerPoint here. So we showed you a little bit of the layer tab. And showed you a little bit on the PBS screen, the layer tab, but here is an example of a layer tab for someone's completed bid. This particular flight attendant bid generic in every layer. They did not bid any specific trips. So they used generic parameters to create their bid. You can see, we'll just go through and kind of see how this bid is read by the PBS system. This particular flight attendant in layer 1, you can look at everything that they have selected for layer 1. It is prefer pairing length property of 2 days. So they would really like to have 2-day trips that report between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. with a maximum connection time, which is your sit time in between flights, of 1 hour and 30 minutes, and a maximum landing per duty, which is the number of legs in a duty period, of 2. So 2-day trips that report between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. with a sit time no more than 1 hour and 30 minutes and 2 legs a day. The flight attendant then expanded their criteria, which you can see because they added more pairings to each pairing layer, increasing their total pairings. In layer 2, they decided that they would still like to have 2-day trips, but now they don't really care when they sign in, and they don't really care how long the sit time is. They still want to keep the property of maximum landing per duty with the preference of 2. So in layer 2, they bid 2 days, 2-day trips with maximum 2 legs per day. If the system cannot create a legal line with those parameters, this flight attendant has agreed to add in 3-day trips. Has agreed to add in 2-day trips that have any amount of legs per day. So this person just really likes 2-day trips. First, they want 2-day trips with all these parameters. Then they want 2-day trips with maximum 2 legs a day. And then they decide, you know what, just give me any 2-day trips. I don't care how many legs or sign-in time or sit time or anything like that. I just want 2 days. If I can't hold 2 days, now I would like 3-day trips. But if you're going to force me to work 3-day trips, this person is more senior than a first-time line bidder, so they can be a little bit more picky. But if they say, if I can't hold 2-day trips, then I'd like to hold 3-day trips. But if you're going to make me fly a 3-day trip, I want it to sign in report between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., have no more than 1.5 hours of sit time, and 2 legs a day. If the system still can't give them a line from that, they're willing to work 3-day trips that have no more than 2 legs a day. They don't care what time it signs in or what sit time is. If the system still can't do that, they've agreed that they will work 1-day trips, which are turns. Keep in mind that these turns or any of these trips will not have the ODANs or red eyes included. But so they decided that they will be okay with working 1-day trips, which are turns. But again, they're a little bit restrictive. They want to make sure that they report at a certain time, have a certain amount of maximum sit time, and are the 2 leg a day turns, no more legs than that. And then if they still can't create a line with all of these different options, they have agreed to add in 4-day trips, but they only will work or allowing the system to award them a trip that has a 4-day trip with maximum 2 legs per day. This is a good example of the OR logic, because in this last layer, layer 7, you'll see that prefer pairing length 1 and prefer pairing length 4 exist in the same layer. Since prefer pairing length is the property for both of those preferences, you're telling the system, I would like turns or 4 days, and they're weighted the same in that layer. But you also have this property down here, maximum landing per duty, which is a different property than prefer pairing length. So you're adding in the and logic, which means layer 7 is telling the system, I am willing to work a turn, a 1-day trip with a maximum of 2 legs per day, or a 4-day trip with a maximum of 2 legs per day. And all of those are weighted equally. Those are all of this 1,949 in layer 7. Okay, so that's a little bit of an overview of the layer tab for bidding generically. If you were, just one more thing to point out, if you were bidding specific, this flight attendant did not, but if you were bidding specific in one of your layers, you could see the specific pairings under this pairing drop down here. I'll show you on the PBS screen. So let's just quickly, let's say you decide to bid a couple specific sequences in your layer 1. You really want those trips. And so you bid the specific sequence number that operates on those days. Those trips are going to populate on your layer overview calendar in the layer that you put them in. And then you decided to expand your bid and bid generically in layers 2 through 7. So if you go to add more properties and you start to bid generically in your layer 2, you'll notice that it did not add any green lines to your layer 2 because this is only when specific sequences are selected that they show up in this way. But in your layer 2 on your layer tab, you can see here how we were looking earlier that 2 days have been separated out in your layer 2 and everything that's not a 2-day has been placed in your layer 3. Here you'll also note that since now we have this first layer of specific bids, that you can see the specific pairing on that date in your layer 1. As you add more specific pairings to your layers, or your layer 1 in this case, they'll all be listed here. So that's just a way to see on your layer overview tab all of the specific pairings that you bid, all of the generic properties that you bid. Now we'll go to days off, which is a very important thing to learn, and it's slightly different than how you bid days off in reserve. So you do not need to bid your days off. Well, you need to make sure that you do not bid them on the reserve days off tab. You're familiar with the reserve days off tab where it'll say reserve here. So it's like a reminder, hey, you're on the reserve days off tab. But you'll bid your line holder days off on the monthly calendar. In order to bid a day off on the monthly calendar, you can click on, oh, is it?
No, mine
Okay.
is just slow.
Okay.
Good.
You'll select the day off that you want. In this example, this flight attendant was selecting a day off for January 22nd. And then they selected the layer or layers that they would like to bid the day off and clicked add bid. It's important to note that any pairings with a duty period that touches the selected days off will be eliminated from the pairing pool for that layer or layers that you selected that day off in. So in this example, the flight attendant selected January 22nd as a day off. That means that any trip or pairing that originates on January 22nd will be eliminated from their layer 1, but also any pairing or trip that crosses over January 22nd, or even if the debrief touches it. So let's say you have a trip that gets in on the 21st at 11:55 p.m. You're going to have your debrief after that, which will carry into the 22nd. So that trip will automatically be removed from your pairing pool for that layer. I point this out because bidding too many days off could cause an insufficient number of pairings in your pools for your required line. This will give you what is called pairing none, or PN. We'll look at reasons in your award at the end of this slideshow, and I'll talk more about pairing none. But the possibility pairing none happens when you do not bid a sufficient number of pairings to create a line at your seniority. So the PBS system will then assign you trips outside of your pairing pools to create a legal line. To avoid getting pairing none, you really want to make sure you bid to your seniority's percentage to make sure that you have at least some say in what pairings you're being awarded so that PBS will not assign you trips outside of your pairing pools. To continue for days off, here I just want to show you that in this layer 1, this flight attendant opted to bid specific. So when you bid a specific sequence, remember you're not going to bid any generic properties in that layer. And so they decided they really wanted this trip. And so they bid it specifically in layer 1. What you're telling the system, oh, you can still bid days off in your layer 1 and overlap it with a specific sequence. But what this tells the system is give me that pairing if you can. And if I can't hold that pairing, please try to give me the day off. So like I was saying earlier on this last slide, that any pairings with a duty period that touches the selected days off will be eliminated from the pairing pool. This is when you're bidding generically. But when you bid specific, you can bid specific sequences over the days off, and it will tell the system, give me that sequence, and if not, then I would like the day off. I wrote a little example for what this flight attendant was trying to do here in their layer 1. So in my hypothetical example, this flight attendant really, their mother's birthday was on the 22nd, and their family was having a brunch for their mom's birthday on the 22nd at their home in Detroit. And so this flight attendant really wanted to try to be at home for that brunch the morning of the 22nd. There was this trip right here that you can see they specifically bid that had a long Detroit layover, and it would have that flight attendant in town on the layover in the morning of the 22nd for their mother's birthday brunch. You would really like to get paid to see family, so you bid that specific sequence, telling PBS to give you that sequence or pairing if it can. However, if you can not fly that specific trip, you'd like to have the days off so that you can travel to Detroit to be with your mom on her birthday. So that's an example of when you would bid a specific pairing over days off. This also says if you bid specific days off, you may want to consider adding pairings that touch those days off in your later layers, or back yourself up with pairings you're willing to fly to try to avoid being assigned things you didn't bid for. So let's say you really want this string of 3 days off. So you'll bid them in these first layers, but maybe then in later layers, you try to, you'd like these days off, but you bid specific pairings that touch either the morning of the 21st, returning that morning, or departing on the 23rd. So if you couldn't hold all 3 days off, you're backing yourself up with pairings that maybe still give you your desirable outcome of being able to be in a certain place on the 22nd, but still having you work trips that touch the 21st or the 23rd. You want to give the system as many options as possible that are you're willing to fly to avoid being assigned things that are outside of your pairing pools. That would maybe be a 4-day trip that goes right over all of these days. So give them every possible pairing that would fit into what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, so we have talked about, let me go to the layer tab here, hang on. We've talked about pairings, which are the specific pairings when you're bidding specifically. Properties, which are the generic things that you're bidding that you'll be able to see. There's this other tab here, line properties. Line properties are, well, the pairing tab is how you select the pairings that are in your pairing pools that PBS uses to create your line. The line properties are you telling the PBS system how to build your line. So it takes the pairings and uses those to create a line, but the line properties are how to tell PBS to construct your line. A lot of these are a little bit more advanced than our PBS bidding basics class. But one of the important ones that can get a little bit complex, but I think it's important to try to teach you just a general overview and start getting some of the terms into your head, is the target credit range. So we talked a little bit in the beginning about how the targeted line average is on your message board. So this is the number that you can expect to be flying close to this number when you're based in Chicago in February. But we do have the line property target credit range, which I'm sorry that I keep doing this. I'm not a PowerPoint professional, but target credit range. The default target credit range is 70 to 90 hours. So even if you do not select this line property, you don't bid a target credit range at all, that's completely fine because the target credit range defaults to 70 to 90. This means that you will not be awarded less than 70 hours or more than 90 hours if you do not put in a target credit range. You may request a value anywhere between 40 and 110 hours in your PBS bid. PBS has the ability to award anywhere between 40 and 110 hours. However, I will say that at a new seniority, or at most seniorities, being awarded a 40-hour or a low time line less than 70 hours in PBS is unlikely. That line average of 78 that you saw for the monthly line average for Chicago, it's basically saying, or let me back up. If the system is to award a 40-hour line, that means that someone else has to be bidding a high timeline in order to reach that average. So if a lot of people want to fly high hours in your base, PBS will be able to award more low time lines in your base. But if everyone is trying to bid low time, everyone's not going to get it because the line average is hovering around 78. And so it needs to maintain that. So you could request to bid low time with 40 hours, but I'm saying at a junior seniority, you are not going to hold a low time line. But just to give you an idea of a target credit range, so that as you gain more seniority, or maybe it will come more into play when you have vacation days on your schedule and you're entering into the bid with some existing credit. Some rules for bidding a target credit range are that TCR is cumulative, not layer specific. This means that if you bid a minimum of 60, as this person did in their TCR, that value will be maintained throughout all subsequent layers as the minimum. And also you must select a minimum and maximum value with a range of no less than 5 hours. This is because there are no trips that are less than 5 hours. So your target credit range has to expand by at least the value of one trip. So in this example, this flight attendant bid a minimum target credit range of 60 and a max of 65 in their layer 1. This means that they would like to bid or to hold a PBS award between 60 and 65 hours. And if they cannot hold between 60 and 65 hours, it'll move to their TCR of layer 2 and try to construct a line that is between the minimum of 60 and maximum of 70. This is cumulative, so the lowest or highest TCR value selected in any layer will be maintained throughout subsequent layers. So even though this says 65 to 70, effectively it means 60 to 70. But so then if you can't hold between 65 and 70 in layer 2, you would like for it to try to construct a line that's between 70 and 75. And if you cannot hold that, you would like to have between 75 and 80. Again, if it cannot construct a line between 75 and 80 at your seniority, you're saying, okay, can we try 80 to 85? And if it cannot do that, you did not put a TCR in layer 6 or 7, which puts you back to the default credit range of 70 to 90. So it'll try in layer 6 to give you couldn't hold between 80 and 85. So it'll basically give you an award of a line that is built with a TCR of 85 to 90 in these last layers. So we did talk earlier about PN, which is when the system awards you pairings outside of your pairing pool because you did not bid for enough pairings to create legal for a system to create an award. TCR is one of the common ways that can cause you to go LN, which means layer none. And it's where your line properties cannot be met in any layer. So like I said, realistically, at a newer, higher seniority, you will not be able to hold a low time line in your TCR. So you want to make sure that you expand your TCR to a realistic amount of hours or amount of credit for your seniority, or as this person did, expand it to the default range. So I said that you likely will not be able to hold a low timeline, but it's possible that you would maybe be able to bid a high time target credit range for PBS to award you a TCR that is above 90, in the 90 to 110 credit range. But there's a couple things that I would like to point out about that, and it's just that PBS has to, the default for PBS is to accommodate you with at least 11 days off. The only way for the system to give you less than 11 days off is if you use a waiver, the waive minimum days off property waiver, a waive minimum days off. So if you do not add the waive minimum days off waiver, or there's another one, which is the 30 and 7 waiver, which the PBS system will not grant you more than 30 hours of flying in a 7-day period, unless you waive that and allow it to. If you do not use these waivers, it may be impossible for the system to award you the 90 to 110 hour line because of the constraints that are put on the system of needing to require those 11 days off, or the maximum of 30 hours of flying in the 7-day period.
Question from the chat for you.
Yes.
Is there any issue with starting at a higher credit in layer 1 and working down to layer 2 or 7? Does it work that way?
Yes, you can do it that way as well. That's another way to do TCR. And I don't want to get too tied up in TCR right now, because this is a basic class and you will realistically not be able, even if you put in a TCR, the system's not going to give you a lot of wiggle room to move within more than a few hours on either side of the 70 to 90 default range, just because at your seniority, it can't veer too far from that. But if you have more questions about target credit range methods of bidding, there is that PBS guide that I've been talking about, as well as some videos on crew change and on the APFA website, which I will show you how to get to later. But I just did want to point out that if you're trying to bid high time, if you don't use those waivers that I was talking about, it might be impossible for the system to award you that high time line. And this could result you in getting that layer none that we were talking about, which is something that you want to avoid. So if you are bidding high time, you may want to try to get some more information about those waivers and add them in order to prevent yourself from going layer none. Another method could just to be bid within the target credit range and then pick up trips after bids are finalized to get yourself to a higher time month. But let's continue. And I'm going to actually have another one of our Chicago BCRs, Jason, step in and teach this small portion about buddy bidding, which is another line property that you can use if you're interested. He is a buddy bidder, so I'll let him take over this part for a little while.
Hello. So the buddy bidding is something that really, changes the career for me. It makes trips so much more bearable when you have a friend. So I want to give a moment to that. The line property allows you to bid with another or up to 4 other flight attendants, assuming that the pairings you select have enough positions for your group. The system places all people in the group at the status seniority level of the most junior person in the buddy bid. So most buddy bidders may use 1 or 2 people, like total of 2 or 3 people in the group. If you go much larger than that, you're really ruining your chances of actually flying together because it's got to have enough positions for you. And it's not necessarily going to award an entire line with your buddy bidders. You may just get a certain number of trips. It's going to give you as many as it can. So really looking at this, it's showing the screenshot of what you'll see if you are initiating the buddy bid. After you go in and submit the request to the other people. If you're the initiator, you'll see once you submit it, it'll show accepted with your employee number, and then it'll show pending with the other person's employee number. I just blocked them out. So that's where those numbers would show. And then on the next slide, you can see what it looks like when you're actually submitting it. So you go into it's under my favorites because I use it all the time, but it's under the properties for the line tab. And you type in the employee number. If you're using more than one, you'll put in a comma and then continue typing the numbers. Once you hit add, that's when it submits it to the other people. And when they log into their PBS, they will select to accept it if they want to fly with you, and it'll process it from there. Now, the initiator is the person who does the bidding, and the buddy bid should be placed in layer 1. We aren't going to go into too much specifics about what happens within the buddy bid as PBS runs, but we wanted to show you at least how to send a request and to, again, clarify that you, as the initiator, you're the one who needs to submit the bid. If you choose to be in the group, you are unable to use the avoid person property. That's just another thing we wanted to point out about PBS and the way that it functions. You can only have a buddy bidder group or an avoid person property in there. And if you are invited to join the buddy bid, from the line tab, you see 2 options, accept or reject. So that's it on buddy bidding.
All right, so just going to talk a little bit about what you should do after your bid is complete. And this is very important. We go to the layer tab again, which is our favorite tab here. You can see view pairing set at the top. So let me look on my actual PBS here, my layer tab. This is obviously not a complete bid. You can see all the 0 layers, but I just want to show you that when you do have a complete bid here and you think that you're all done and you want to just be done bidding for the month, one last thing that we really suggest that you do is go to view pairing set, and you can look at what you bid in each layer. So this flight attendant bid just these 2 sequences specifically in layer 1. In layer 2, which again was 2-day pairings, you can see what is included in your layer 2. Now, we recommend once you have all of your properties and preferences into your layer tab, it would look much more complete than this, that you view each layer and make sure that there's no anomalies or things that you didn't think that you bid in each layer. So if you go into your layer 2 and you're like, oh my gosh, I did not mean to bid this sequence, you can either go back and adjust your properties and preferences so that these trips do not populate in your layer 2. Or if it's just maybe one outlier that got in there, you can remove that sequence from that layer. Or if you can remove it from all layers. Then when you go back to your layer tab, here it shows what specific sequences or pairings that you bid on specific dates. It also shows that you removed a pairing ID on a specific date. And that's just one last way of double checking so you know what you're bidding in each layer and make sure that you're okay with what you're bidding there.
Do you think you could explain one more thing while you have PBS open?
Sure.
If someone wants to go back in, they've already done specific bids and they
Yeah.
want to go back in and add a preference order, can you just show them how they can add something else to that same layer? Like, you have specific ones in layer 1 still or no?
Yeah, so there's a couple specific trips in layer 1.
So maybe go in and add a position order.
Oh,
preference
position order, sorry,
for
yes.
That specific trip.
I see what you're saying.
Without having to redo it all.
Yes, so you can add in it's
Prefer position order.
right. I'm wondering. Oh wait. Is it on this? For position order is
Order pairing.
oh,
You have it there.
I'm sorry, I had it favorited. That's one I never used, so I'm surprised that I had that favorited. But okay, sorry about that. You can add prefer position order and add it to your layer. So this is going to be something that we have coming soon to be aircraft specific. But as of right now, it's important to note that this will apply to every aircraft. So if you're preferring position 1 in that layer, it's going to apply to all of the pairings and sequences that are in that layer. So maybe position 1 on the 321 with 20 seats is not the same as position 1 on the 319 or position 1 on a 787. So you have to think about
Trips are in that layer.
what trips are in that layer and if you're wanting to put the position orders to those trips. Since you're bidding specifically, you should know what trips are in that layer. And let's say that you decide that you like 1, 4, 2, 3, and you can add that to your layer. Oops, sorry. And then you'll see, since we did,
It was such a small pool.
it was, yes, such a small pairing pool to begin with that it changed it quite a bit. But it's also important to note here, this flight attendant, what trips they bid specifically. Let's look at this trip. This is London. So they bid London specifically in layer 1 which at a junior seniority, I would probably not recommend using my layer 1 to specific bid London because you're not going to hold it and that would be effectively a wasted layer. But in this hypothetical example, this flight attendant selected London in their layer 1 specifically. And then they added in positions 1, 4, 2, and 3 in that order in layer 1. Remember that prefer in PBS means only. So they only bid positions 1, 4, 2, and 3 for London on these sequences in their layer 1. London has a lot more than, depending on where you're based and what aircraft it's on, but it at every base has more than 4 positions. So you effectively are not bidding positions 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. on this trip because it has more positions than 4. If this specific trip was a 737 trip, then great, you bid all of the positions on that trip. Or maybe you really hate positions 5, 6, 7, and 8 on the 7, 8, and for some reason you did purposely not want to bid those. But just to point out that prefer means only. So you are only bidding those positions you selected there, which is why when you have 2 trips specifically bid, and you bid 4 positions of those 2 trips, your pairings in layer 1 is 8 because pairings are the number of positions per sequence in the month.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yes. You're welcome. So yes, we talked about view pairing set after your bid is complete. And bear with me again, someone watching is like, oh my gosh, she could do this such an easier way. And I wish I knew you earlier, but I think it's okay. Now we're going to go to what to do after bids have closed. They've processed. It's now the 18th of the month at noon and your award is available. You log back into PBS and you can see the award tab. If you try to log in before noon or before a few minutes before noon on the 18th, you'll get the system is under maintenance. Don't panic, just wait until noon on the 18th and you'll be able to see your award. You'll still be able to view what you bid for that month, but the award will show here on this calendar. It'll say award and you'll be able to see what you were given. So this is a real life example of what a flight attendant, me, was given in January from the PBS award run. I want to point out that if you're a little bit unsure of why you were given something, there is this view reason report tab here, which can give you a more in-depth reasoning as to why you got certain things awarded onto your schedule. But the next slide is going to zoom in a little bit. You'll see this top bar here with some information and then the trips that you held. So reading your award, this top bar here shows what layer your overall award was solved in. So I didn't get the trips necessary to bid my line in layer 1. It moved to layer 2, didn't get them there. Layer 3, didn't get them there. Layer 4, all the way down. And then in layer 6, finally, it had enough pairings in my pairing pools to create a legal award at my seniority. So what else? This shows that I have 12 days off in the month. My total credit that I was awarded for the month was 87 hours and 27 minutes. In the month of January, I did not do a target credit range, so even without doing a target credit range, you can see that it awarded me a schedule within the 70 to 90 hour range. Then premium here shows 0. This premium does not include lead pay or galley pay, speaker purser pay if you're qualified in those. It's in regards to international premium pay, which I did not have any on my January schedule. Then you can look at the individual trips that I was awarded, or pairings or sequences, however you'd like to speak to it, on my line. This shows that I was awarded this Tampa one-day trip, a turn trip, with a report time of 7:22 a.m., departure of 8:22 a.m. It was awarded from, it says priority 5. That means it was awarded from my layer 5 or my pairing pool 5 and seat 3, which is position 3 on the aircraft. So it's a Tampa turn with only 50 minutes on the ground and on a 737. And it's worth 5 hours and 45 minutes of credit, and my time away from base is 7 hours and 52 minutes. Here you can see that it originates on the 12th. It's possible that I could have been awarded multiple Tampa turns throughout the month, in which case Tampa would only show up once on this overview, but it would have 2 dates in this mini calendar box, as well as show up multiple times on your award calendar. This I just want to point out that this trip, this Cleveland trip with an 18-hour layover in Cleveland, was awarded to me in my layer 6. If you are in this scenario where you did not bid enough pairings for PBS to create your line, you could be awarded a sequence outside of your pairing pool, outside of your layers that you did not intend to bid, or you did not bid. And the priority would say PN, which means pairing pool none. So again, just to avoid doing that, you want to bid to your seniority, bid enough pairings that you can have some say in what you're going to fly. Similarly, it could say CN if you're awarded something outside of your pairing pool. This is pretty hard to avoid. Coverage needed days. Now, coverage needed days are not decided in advance. What it is when many flight attendants are throughout the base or throughout the system are bidding to have the same days off. So think it regularly occurs around Christmas. It could occur if there is something very popular going on in your city and everyone bids to have the same day off, or it's just a date where there's trips and they need to be filled, so someone has to fly them. And if every person in base bid it off, the junior folks are going to get coverage needed days put onto their schedule, and a trip will be plotted onto there that came from outside of your 7 layers. The best way to sort of have some way in controlling this is just to try to bid as many trips as meet your seniority. So you are bidding the trips that you would prefer to fly on the coverage needed days, rather than having a trip plotted onto your schedule on a coverage needed day that is undesirable to you. But again, you cannot have a magic ball to see when all the coverage needed days are, so we just suggest to bid to your seniority all the time. See. Okay, one last concept that I would like to speak about is the standing bid. So a standing bid is something that is saved into the PBS system. If for some reason you are unable to enter a monthly bid, your standing bid can guide the system to create your line. This says a standing bid can be used for any month. Therefore, specific bidding cannot be entered because sequence numbers change every month, trips change every month. There's no way to put specific sequences into your standing bid. So your standing bid is generic at every layer. Also, specific days off are not taken into account. This is just a very generic way for the system to put pairings into your pairing pools to create a line. It's important to remember that with your standing bid, less is more. A good standing bid is realistic to your seniority and the type of flying in your base. Since pairings can differ month to month, always make sure your standing bid is not overly restrictive or complicated. Take time every once in a while to update your standing bid. For example, if you add in seasonal layovers, such as in Chicago, we only fly Paris part of the year now. You would want to make sure that your standing bid is updated. For someone new, I don't recommend putting Paris in your standing bid anyways, unless maybe you're a French speaker, but take time to update your standing bid because your base flying changes and your standing bid, if it's specific to a certain time of year, or certain type of flying that your base doesn't have that month, it may not populate any pairings into your pairing pools. Some people think that they can just have their standing bid sitting there and then add in days off on your layer overview calendar and call it good. But we definitely want to warn you that this is not the case. As soon as you make any change into the PBS system, even as simple as selecting a couple of days off, it is going to no longer pay attention to your standing bid because it'll see it as you have started bidding. And so if you only add in days off, that's the only thing that you're bidding. So don't think that you can just have your standing bid and only add in days off on the layer overview calendar and call it good. That is not good. But what you can do is you can export your standing bid from the standing bid tab and do that as a first step in your bidding process, and then bid or continue to build from your standing bid. So the purpose of the standing bid is if you don't bid anything at all, it's there to back you up. But if you do want to utilize your standing bid, you can export it into the system and then continue to build your bids on top of that. That's really the completion of the bidding part of this course, but I do have some of the additional resources that we were talking about earlier. You might be familiar with this in-flight page. Eventually this in-flight page will be no more, but as of right now, it will look like this. And it says bidding and resources on this tab here at the top. There's a couple different links that are really helpful on the bidding and resources tab under current bid sheets, crew change, and the PBS guide. This is the same PBS guide that I showed you earlier from the hyperlink on the message board on your PBS. When PBS is not open during the bid processing time frame, you won't be able to get to that message board. So this is another way that you can get to it. Crew change has quite a few helpful videos and information. This current bid sheets has a hyperlink for what is called PBS cover sheet. I can show you that in a second. I'll show you that from my website. Another way to have some great resources beyond this course are on the APFA website. So if you go to the APFA website, hover over bidding, monthly bidding, PBS home, it'll bring you to a lot of information there as well as some more in-depth videos on different topics. Just another great way to get factual information there. This is a thank you from us here in Chicago. If you are Chicago-based, specifically if you're Chicago-based, here is our APFA general contact number. Here is my email as your base council, one of your base council representatives. If you would like to, if you have any follow-on questions, feel free to email me. But let me go back to additional resources really quick just to show you something here, and then we can finish up. So additional resources. One of the ways to oh, hang on. So one of the ways to get there is through Crew Portal. And then you can go to Departments, Bidding and Resources. This will bring you to the same screen that you saw in my earlier slide. You can click Current Bid Sheets. PBS cover sheet. And then this is a great resource that a lot of people don't necessarily know about, and it includes things to do with bidding at PBS, but also just tons of other helpful information. So some of it might be a little bit too advanced, but this is where you find your wrap start times, standby information, a bunch of different legality things that could help you bid in certain ways. So it's just another place to find some helpful information, as well as another way to get to that same PBS guide that I have been showing you multiple different ways to get there. If you click on this, it takes you back to the PBS guide. So that is one of the additional resources there. So yes, I don't know if there's any more questions in the chat, but we just wanted to thank you for attending the virtual session. This is our first time teaching this PBS class here in Chicago, and we are happy that you joined us, and hopefully we'll be able to teach something like this again in the future. All right, thank you.